Welcome to the Confessions Podcast. I'm Cindy Wagman.
And I'm Jess Campbell. We're two former in-house nonprofit pros turned coaches and consultants to purpose-driven organizations.
After years of building up our separate six-figure businesses from scratch, we've thrown a lot of spaghetti at the wall and have lived to see what sticks.
We're on a mission to help other nonprofit coaches and consultants looking to start or scale their own businesses past the six-figure mark by pulling back the curtain.
Whether you're still working inside a nonprofit and thinking of one day going out on your own, or you've been running your consulting business for years, you understand that working with nonprofits is just different. We're giving you access to the business leaders who serve nonprofits as their clients. You know, the people who truly get it.
No more gatekeeping, no more secrets. This podcast is going to give you an inside look at what running a successful nonprofit coaching and consulting business looks like. Basically, we're asking people how much money they make, how they get paid, and what has and hasn't worked in their businesses.
Listen in as these leaders share their insights, their numbers, and the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to building a nonprofit coaching or consulting business. We're going to empower you to make the power moves that give you the income and freedom you set out to create from day one.
You ready? Let's go. Hey, Cindy.
Hey, Jess.
I'm so excited to talk with you. Again,
I'm always excited. I love having these conversations.
I was just thinking, like, we in podcast land, a little behind the scenes is we practice the art of batching. And so there's some weeks where we don't get to see each other. And so it's been a minute.
And both of us have been really busy now.
Been slammed.
Yeah, for you listeners, you are really you are like a fly on the wall in our conversations on this podcast today.
Yeah, I think both of us walked into today's scheduled time that we booked what feels a lifetime ago. And we were like, are we really doing this? Because there's so much to do. But I'm excited because we have a topic that everyone always needs to know about. And it's personally something for me that I didn't get sold on or start practicing until like 2 or 3 years into my business.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I think people are surprised sometimes that even though I show up specifically on social media all the time, it is not my comfortable place at all.
I mean, okay, so let's like let everyone know what we're talking about because I want to dive in.
Yes.
If you guess this right, gold star for you. So we're talking about visibility today because, I mean, to your point, Jess, I actually I think people find this surprising too. I hate seeing myself on social. I hate seeing myself on video. I hate looking at myself speaking. I think all of us are a little uncomfortable with that, but visibility has been an important part of our business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, it's just, it doesn't come naturally to me. I was actually with some girlfriends last week and none of us are the types of friends that just naturally pull out our phone to be like, let's capture this moment. Let's take a photo. You know, sometimes in groups, there's always one and it's certainly not me. So it just doesn't come naturally to like document my life. And
Same.
I have to really push myself to like put it out there.
Do you think it's because we're old?
No, I've always been like this. Actually, in college, when Facebook originated, Mark Zuckerberg and I are the same age and grade, which is depressing considering where we are in life compared to one another. But when Facebook originated, for those young people that might be listening, it was only available college by college. It rolled out. And so I was like a sophomore or junior, I can't remember. And a friend of mine, because I was like, I'm not doing that. And a friend of mine created a profile for me. And that's how I got on Facebook. So
I love that story.
I've always been like this.
Yeah. I don't remember how I got on Facebook, but I do know it was in 2007. A couple years after college for me. So yeah, but like even I hear this from people a lot because I I have, and I know both of us, I mean, we're booking a photo shoot together in January. Like, we put ourselves out there, even when it's uncomfortable. And I've invested quite significantly in like what that looks like and feeling confident in putting myself out there, but it did not come naturally to me either. The only thing I'll say is like, I don't care enough to like filter or censor my content. So like, once I started, I was just like, I'm going to be me. And so if I don't have things perfectly polished, or if I'm not saying things, like I go live a lot because I just feel that's really easy for me, and not a lot, but I mean like compared to other things. And I'm not scripted and I don't care. Like it's fine if I don't say all the right things.
I think for folks maybe listening who, especially for any consultants that are doing one-to-one work, or, you know, they don't need hundreds and hundreds of clients every year. I can see where they're like, why would I invest any of my resources or time into it? And my pushback to that is always, people can't find what they can't see. And I can't tell you how many of my clients have come to me through Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, speaking. I know that you are such a staunch proponent of referral-based marketing, and I think that that's wonderful. But I'm one of those people that hasn't been my main driver of new business. And it's 100% because of my visibility that I have a business. And I think what would be maybe helpful, because it evolves, it changes every damn day, it feels like, to talk through like what channels have worked for us in our business. For folks who are kind of considering, okay, in 2023 or in the new year, I'm going to give it a go, or I'm going to do one thing. Which one am I going to pick? Knowing that what works for you is going to be different than what works for me versus someone else.
Well, I'm happy to start because I feel like I've tried all the things. And I can tell you the ones that I feel have the most payoff, but some that I feel like are just necessary. So I feel like LinkedIn is one that is really important as a B2B, because that's what we are, right? We often like don't think, but we're B2B. So B2B, I definitely feel like LinkedIn is the place. I love speaking. I really love speaking. I love speaking on stages. I love speaking on podcasts. I feel like, and I've had direct like business coming out of those opportunities. I mean, we're recording this. I'm like, tomorrow is my 4th in-person speaking at a conference in 3 weeks. I'm a little tired of it, but even that, I feel like I could keep doing it. And I really feel like the traction, there's something about being in person that I think really makes it a lot easier for people to connect with you.
Okay, so let's step back. I'm going to like interview you.
Oh, what?
Well, I'm just going to go through these specifically. So I really like LinkedIn too. Of all the platforms out there, I find it to be one of the easier ones to get actually seen, because it does that kind of spider web effect of networks. And our friend Tanya Bhattacharya will tell you that only 3% of LinkedIn users produce original content. So there's just a vast opportunity, unlike a lot of the other platforms. But I'm just curious, like, what your posting schedule is, like, how has that changed over the last few years now that there has been an introduction to video? And then what specifically are you getting from it? Because I can share, and then I can share what. For me.
So for me, it is kind of like, I treat it like I treat my weekly email, in the sense that now I'm not as consistent on LinkedIn. I'm the first to say I actually don't have a schedule. Usually I just go with video based on, I like posting stuff like, here's what I'm seeing from my clients. You might be seeing this too. If you are, like, let's chat, book a call. But so I do that, and it's really not scheduled in advance. And that's probably not the best strategy, but it's fine. And then I have a newsletter where I actually take my podcast, because I have the small nonprofit podcast, and I take that and turn it in that email that goes out with that to my list. I also publish on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn newsletter. So between the two of those, what I like about LinkedIn is that when I go speak at a conference, or when I present, even like I presented at your Make It Happen conference, and I can connect with people on LinkedIn, even if I don't have their email address, which is obviously always the goal, but even if I don't have that, I feel like I'm in better control of like what content goes out there. It's a little more long form, it's a little more helpful. And I feel like that is how people have sort of, it's like a nurture space for that. For me.
And are you doing any prospecting or outreach, or are you just a content creator?
Right now, content creator. What about you? I'm always uncomfortable with the direct outreach, but I know it works for people.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, because I mean, like, if you think you're inconsistent with LinkedIn, I'm like a next level. I do try and post 1 time a week. That's my goal. And the reason is because my experience with LinkedIn is posts really have longevity compared to other platforms, and letting your posts breathe lets the algorithm run its full course, versus when you post on top of one another, it can shut a post down. And I, even just this last week, I was like flexing around in there, and I was getting content from like October. We're talking in mid-November right now. These are 2, 3, 4 weeks old content from people in my network. And I was like, interesting, what is happening? I will also say on LinkedIn that anything that's kind of controversial, kind of
stake in the ground. I like to call it like your stake in the ground or a rant.
Yeah, something it like always does really well. And for me, like having a proper opinion about something. And that comes with a grain of salt. Like, you always, it is still a professional network. So I will say that. And then the other thing that I think people forget about LinkedIn is people are sleepers. They're like incognito. And so while people might not be engaging with your post, commenting, liking, etc., they are reading it, I think, at a different pace than other platforms. And so I think that's just another reason why LinkedIn should be in people's strategies. Yeah. Because again, 1 time a week, the longevity, and then just the absorption of content, I think, is unlike the other social platforms out there that make it worthwhile.
I want to ask you, so you said you don't do direct outreach on LinkedIn, but I feel like you've done a little bit like somewhat direct outreach on Instagram, or at least like more sliding into people's DMs. And I've never done that. So I would love to hear about your experience with that, and like how you keep it, because I know you keep it authentic, and tell us, give us your wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, so for anyone that follows me, Instagram is my preferred platform, but in general, I've just pulled back on social media a lot. And I think that that's an evolution. I'm 3 years into really running social accounts across the board for Out in the Boons. And, where before I was like 5 to 6 times a day showing up on stories all the time. I just don't do that level anymore. One thing that I used to do is I really did used to like search hashtags and find my ideal clients, which on Instagram is a little bit more tricky, because one thing, I can't believe I've just had this epiphany. Like, I cannot believe it took me this like 3 years to like have this aha moment. But people go to LinkedIn with their professional hat on, their networking hat on. And people come to Instagram to chill the fuck out. And so I'm over here like trying to teach and educate, and like people just want to zone out.
We want to see your dog. We want to see Billy.
Is the place to go when you're like taking that 15-minute break after back-to-back Zoom calls, Yeah. And I cannot believe it's taken me this long to have that epiphany, because what now I do is I really try to like entertain on Instagram more than like educate and inform and show like my dog.
And you are really entertaining, I have to say, especially so when you do like the memes. Oh my gosh. Goodness.
I said to Mackenzie, should I just like be a meme account on Instagram? Because literally it's
so good.
Best engagement. But going back to the outreach. So what I used to do is I really used to search hashtags and find nonprofits or find people that maybe they listed that they were an executive director or a nonprofit founder in their bio. And I would practice like going to a post 2 or 3 and leaving like proper comments on there. It's not just like a heart or like emoji, but like a proper comment on their page. And maybe I would send them a DM, because this has happened like naturally, not me even trying to be sliding into people's DMs, but I'll hear about a nonprofit or it'll come across my For You page or whatever it's called on Instagram. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I see that like you are helping formerly incarcerated women get back to work. I used to work for a nonprofit that did similar work in Los Angeles. I think what your mission is doing is so cool. Like it's real. I'm like genuinely being real, but I'm not like trying to say like, and if you want more information about how you can work with me, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, this is a legit thing. And one of the things, I'm just going to keep talking for like 30 seconds longer. So I run
keep talking for as long as you need.
Well, I was running Campaigns That Convert with a cohort. It's a kind of hybrid course group coaching program. And I guess in one of my lessons, which just goes to show that I need to like revisit them, I mentioned this strategy, this outreach strategy for nonprofits to use with people who follow them. And I got to shout it out to Jo at Make Do, because she listened and caught it. And she started executing that now in her lead up phase. And she wrote in the group, she was like, holy guacamole, like, and this really works. 100% of the people have DM'd me back. Most of them saying like, oh my gosh, no one ever does this, you know, this outreach. When they follow you, send them a note. And I was like, gosh, I love it when I'm like smart, right? when I'm smart and I forget that I'm smart. And it just reminds me that engagement is a two-way street. And like, you got to give a little to get a little. And I just see so many people not doing that. And you're missing the entire point.
Yeah.
So, okay. Rant and
so don't be afraid of DMs, make it authentic, make it two-way. No. And you're not selling, you're connecting.
Can I say one thing I heard on a podcast that I was like, I'll hack this and figure out how to use this someday. But it was a person whose name I've totally forgotten, who does like video production or video editing for companies. So like short form reels, YouTube videos, website videos, etc. And they on LinkedIn will, you know, use the search feature, finding small businesses, and they will say, hey, you know, I went to your website and I saw that you don't have any video, and here are 3 prompt ideas, or here are 3 questions you could like do face to cam. Thought it would be helpful. And if you're looking for a more in-depth strategy, like let's hop on the phone. And this person said it works like gangbusters. So I'm thinking for people who listen, it's like, hey, I looked at your annual report and noticed that like of your revenue streams, you have no grant making. Like, are you interested in like getting a starter pack for grant writing started? Yeah. Like, let's jump on a call. Or like, I see that your website could use a refresh. Like I do that. Or like, stuff like that. And it's like leading with value.
Yeah. Which still like, I don't know. I get it, but like, it still feels like a stretch for me. I mean, the worst are people who connect like, oh, I see like some random fact, or like, we know people in common, and then they try and sell you on shit right away. I'm like, no.
I don't like that either.
No,
next
I don't think
time,
anyone
you know
does.
What we should do next time we get a good one, we should like highlight that or something.
Yeah.
Or invite
maybe
that
we can
on the
find
podcast.
A good one and a bad one.
Yeah.
And roast someone too.
Yeah.
Okay. So social media, I mean, we could go on and on about social media, but I think like where people get stuck is there are different kinds of social, and you have to figure out which one is authentic to you and where your customers are. But there's so many other, let's call them stages or places where you can get seen.
Yeah.
You know, you and I actually, before we started recording, we were talking about other people's audiences and looking at how you can get visible through relationships with other people who either do complementary or similar or serve the same audiences. And I know you've been on both sides of that equation where you have the audience that other people are engaging with and vice versa. So what's your experience been with that? Because I think you've had more success than I have with some of that.
Well, maybe. I think I've been maybe more successful at building, like creating the stage, and you've been more successful speaking on the stage. And I think that's probably why I'm like, I just want to keep building my own stage versus talking on others, because it's been more fruitful for me.
Yeah.
But if I was to go back, it's way easier to attach yourself to other audiences at the beginning than it is to build from scratch. So I don't know really why it just crossed over, and I did not realize that you could do that till like 2 or 3 years in. And after I built my own
you're
online
a community
summit,
builder. Like, I think that you are, that is your zone of genius. And like, you naturally connect people and bring people together. So it makes sense for you to have that.
I guess what I'm saying is hindsight's 2020. And to go back, I would have just like pitched myself to other people's audiences way at the beginning. Because, you know, building your own stage is a lot of work.
Yeah, but you're also in control, right? Like, so as someone who has spoken, like when I launched my book, I was on probably like 15 different podcasts. And I actually was able to track book sales from each one. It wasn't a lot. Now, you and I were talking before as well, talk a lot about, you know, marketing and that visibility sometimes has direct links to business. And sometimes it's just marketing, getting yourself out there and building up that presence for, you know, people might decide in a year to buy that book or to do something else. So it's not that it doesn't have value, but you have getting visible and building off other people's audiences is also a lot of work. It's just different work. And like, I've gotten to a point where I can generally just like show up and talk about things because I've said it so many times. But if I have to create a new presentation or, you know, something like that, that also takes time, right?
Okay, but let's go back. Let's talk about your pitching, because I know both you and our friend Rachel Beerbauer like go through these blitzes where you will like sit down and do the pitching, because unfortunately so many of these stages are still making these like application requirement. It's like, for me, I don't have time for that. And so I admire you all putting the effort in there. So tell us like how do you decide which ones to go to? What kind of things are you pitching? You're also a podcast host extraordinaire. So like, you can tell us on the backside what is a pitch that comes through that is not going to get, you know what I mean? Like, give us the inside scoop.
Okay. So when I pitch other podcasts, I'm very specific in like, here's I know your audience, and this is why I can add value to that audience. And here's what we could talk about. And that served me well. Like I said, when I launched the book, it wasn't like, hey, I have a new book that you should cover on your podcast. It was like, hey, this book is relevant to your audience, and here's some speaking notes or like some thoughts around what we could talk about that would help them raise more money. Right. So, and as a podcast host who gets a ton of unsolicited applications, like there are so many that are generic. I get ones that are like, here's our nonprofit. We're doing such great work. Your audience would love to know about us. And like, we want, or ones that are like, we want to be more visible and get donations. I'm like, you don't know my audience, because my audience is nonprofits. So they're not going to be donating to you. That's not the purpose of our show.
Totally.
So the ones that don't know are really bad. I've also pitched where people have been like, oh, well, I had two really weird ones. One woman was like, you have to rate and review our podcast before I'll consider you as a guest, and like listen to 2 episodes or something like that. And I was like, I don't pay to play. That's like, that feels a little awkward. And then one guy wanted exclusivity. He's like, sure, you can be on my podcast, but you can't be on other podcasts for a year. Like, what? No, dude. I don't know who you think you are.
Yes to that. Yeah.
Anyways, that was pretty funny. But yeah, and I think the same is true of like actual stages or virtual conferences, all of that. Now, I will say virtual conferences, a lot of them, and some in-person stages, a lot of them still come through my network. A couple weeks ago, I was speaking at the Ontario Nonprofit Network's big annual conference, and I was invited to that because my friend Brock knew someone there, and they were looking for someone to speak. So shout out, Brock. That was thank you. And then similarly, tomorrow, at the time of recording this, I'm speaking at the AFP Southeastern Ontario's conference, and someone just referred me. I didn't apply. I didn't know what was happening. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got an email saying like, hey, are you free to do this? And I was like, sure. If I can use content I already have. So
okay, let's talk. Yeah. And we talk about, again, making those decisions, because what about when they require travel and accommodations? And are you, especially the ones in person on stages? I mean, I even host a virtual conference, little old me, and I figure out a way to pay people. So,
oh my God.
I know this is maybe like a tangent, but I guess I'm just deciding, how do you decide?
Yeah. I'll give you like really specifics.
Yeah.
I'll give you specifics because,
you're literally just going through
like an open book. So, and it's crazy. I'm going to get like really, really specific. So I have to weigh, like, the crazy thing is the big conferences, for some reason don't pay. I don't know how they make money or not make money, how they think they can't afford to, but like, over the last, I'll just focus in on the last 3 weeks. Okay. So the first one was Ontario Nonprofit Network. That is a space I've been wanting to get into for years. So they didn't pay, and it was local, but I agreed because of the relationship. They've never, ever, ever had fundraising as a topic in their conference. So this was a really good opportunity for me to get my foot in the door and really make an impact and build those relationships. So for me, no brainer, and it's local. So that was fine. A few days later, I was asked to speak at a very small conference for like a membership organization that served other nonprofits. They paid $3,000 for me to go and speak for an hour, and it was local, right? Like, this is the craziest thing. It's like, I can't tell. Your face was frozen in shock for a minute. I'm like, it's crazy. So they had funding to put on this conference, and it was an hour presentation. It was a group, I kid you not, there were 20 people there. There were people online too. Yeah. And it was local. So I drove for like 40 minutes to the airport area in Toronto. Okay. Then a few days later, I'm at AFP Congress in Toronto, which is like Canada's biggest fundraising conference, also local. They comped me one day of the 2-day conference as a speaker. They do have some funding if you qualify as like what they would consider diverse as a speaker. They also give you an honorarium. So yeah.
Wait. They didn't even give you a ticket?
They gave me 1 day's ticket. 1 day. If you wanted to go 2 days, you had to pay. Yeah. And the only reason I said yes is because they I got to host a dream panel on my ideal topic. So it's a fundraising conference. Typically my nonprofit audience is not there. They're smaller, which is why ONN was a better fit. But for AFP, I pitched talking about consulting and building a consulting business. And I pitched a panel with 3 amazing women. So I hosted the panel with my friend Emma Lucy, Betty Shia, and Kishana Palmer. And so it was a powerhouse panel. And so I wouldn't have applied to that conference, but that topic would fit with that audience for my business. I ended up also hosting a booth at their trade show part of the conference that I shared with my friends at Agents of Good. And we ended up we called it a book nook, and we sold my book, my friend John's book, and then a few other people who were self-published, who don't typically have a presence. So while that wasn't quote unquote profitable, it felt really awesome to be there and take up that space and showcase other people's work. Okay, so that's that. Then tomorrow, tonight I'm driving out to Kingston. It's 2.5 hours away to speak at their AFP conference. I think I get a small honorarium, and I said I would only do that conference if it's content I already had and if they would pay my travel and accommodation. So you can see it's all over the freaking map, right? There's no consistency. If I have to travel, I really am I think there are 1 or 2 conferences that I would pay to speak at. But even that, it feels more like a vanity thing. I'd love to speak at IFC. I don't know if I ever will, but would I pay to be there? Probably. I love the Netherlands. But other than that, I'm really getting a lot more, let's call it discerning about what I say yes and no to. I've been invited to other conferences within Canada that I've turned down because it would cost me $1,500 just to be there. And I'm and there's other issues for some conferences around diversity. There's lots of other reasons I will say no. But yeah, so there's no good rule.
Of those 4 that you just spoke about, how many of those did you get invited to versus you applied to, submitted an application to?
I applied to 1 and I got invited to 3.
Okay. Because I would argue that getting invited, makes the decision a little easier because you're not going through that process of filling out one of those laborious applications and
Yeah.
And so I think everyone has to decide for themselves what is, I just said this earlier, is the juice worth the squeeze? And you've been at this for 7+ years. You have an established audience. You're at a different phase than someone who's just getting started, who might really want to put the effort into speaking on all of the stages just to build an audience.
How many virtual freaking conferences have I done? In the early days, especially any tech company that would have me, I'd be please put me in front of your audience. So I get it. I don't go out asking for those anymore.
Right. Yeah. You're at a different phase of your business, so you can really pick and choose. But I guess for anyone listening, from someone who, to go back, would definitely have put some effort into that in year 1 and year 2, and then reevaluated.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, I just kind of skipped over that. And so now I'm at this stage where I'm probably as picky choosy when it comes to where I will and won't speak. But I know I just don't personally have a lot of the patience to do a lot of this, specifically the application.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Especially Can I add? If they're unpaid.
Yeah. And that's we get to be in control of our time, right?
Yeah.
One thing I'll say, as you were talking, I thought of this, and I think it's really important. one of the things that I have done to make speaking more worthwhile is make sure that when I do speak, especially if I'm not getting paid, almost always if I'm not being paid, I have a call to action of a lead magnet.
Yes.
So for example, now when I speak, for nonprofits, I say you can access the first 4 chapters of my audiobook for free. Here's where you put your email address, etc. When I speak to nonprofit consultants, when I speak to consultants and coaches, I have a proposal template that they can download. But like, I do not speak for free unless I can share a lead magnet.
Yeah, totally.
And I always, if I'm speaking for free, I always have something.
This is also a little bit of a shameless plug, but when I was at the top of this year, I had Mackenzie, my community manager, put together a spreadsheet of like 63 podcasts specific to the nonprofit industry. Because I know for me, when we were getting started, just the searching of it all and like, what's the contact information and was, that was a lot of work before you even got to the place of pitching. So we can maybe put the link to that in the show notes if that's helpful. And take at least maybe that one piece out of it for anyone wanting to do it. But I mean, I love podcasts. I listen to them almost exclusively compared to like watching YouTube videos. I think that in-person events are really coming back around like with a fury. So I could see in 2023, like those being bigger and better than ever. And probably applications for a lot of those events are happening now.
And it's going to be more competitive though. So it'll be interesting, which takes us back to the idea of like, how are you serving? How are you showing up for an audience? It's not about what you want always. It's framing it as like, how do I help the organizers do their job?
100%. Yeah. I guess, how was I going to word this question? Maybe we'll skip over it. Because sorry, this is like a terrible way to end this podcast. But I guess I was thinking like, how are you planning for 2023? And if now is the time to be doing that, what are you looking for?
Yeah. I mean, so going back to that question of like, are you tapping into someone else's audience or your own? I mean, this is now my 2nd podcast. And I'd like to get to a point where the 2 podcasts, the 1 podcast is quite easy for me right now, but I want to get a little bit ahead of the schedule generally with the podcasting, because we didn't talk about this, but visibility is also with your audience and showing up consistently, which we're going to talk about on a separate episode, but like showing up consistently, working, like being visible with your audience, I think is most important out of all. And so that is a bit of a priority because I actually have a lot of stuff happening in the spring and I'm not really applying to speak anywhere that I can think of. But like, honestly, sometimes things just show up in my lap and that's great. So I might do a couple podcast pitches, like once I get the rest of my shit together with all the things that are happening in my business. But yeah, and we can certainly talk for a minute about this, is looking at building more affiliate relationships. So it's not the same thing as being on a stage, but from a visibility perspective, like actually leveraging other people's audiences and letting other people leverage my audience is something that I'm kind of
me too. Playing around with the Enneagram 3 in me wants it to be perfect before we do it.
I think we're both so fun fact, we have the same.
We're like the same, except we're so different. We're
so different, but we have a lot in common and the same,
including
and
our birthdays.
Our birthday, Enneagram 3. Do you know your Myers-Briggs?
I'm an ENFJ.
Okay, so I'm an ENTJ.
What's the T?
I don't know.
Because
thoughtful?
T. I don't think it's thoughtful.
You're an ENF
for feeler.
Feeling.
Oh, yeah, thinking. You're thinking.
I'm thinking. Thoughtful thinking. Yeah, I don't have emotions.
Which is so nice, but I guess everyone should watch out because we are 2 like literal same Scorpios. So
don't cross us.
Don't cross us. Even though people always are really surprised to find out I'm a Scorpio because I come off maybe as like so laid back, but still waters run deep, I guess. Like my mom's always like, you are very intense. And I'm like, yes, I am. Anyway, quick question just before we really wrap this up, is this is a question that I think people were wondering about. For how important do you think it is to podcast hosts, conference speakers, that you have an established audience? How much do you, like, I can speak as a conference host, what matters to me, which is not that. I would rather have diversity, interesting, all those things above, like,
same.
Because I see people saying, like, unless you have an email list of 3,000 people strong, like, you can't be a speaker at our event or whatever. And then it just goes to show that, like, well, what comes first? Is
it's the wrong metric too. It's the wrong metric in my experience. So
but do you think conference organizers say yes more to you or invite you more because they know you have an established audience?
I think that one thing that I've seen is that some of the big ones, especially AFP, they like your speaker scores. So they want to know, like, how you've been rated in the past to see that you're a quality speaker. Again, it's a chicken and egg scenario because you can't get those scores unless you have the opportunity to speak. So I think that's an issue. I wouldn't say audience size because I actually don't have a big audience. But I think I am very niche and specific in what I talk about. And so that helps. Or like when I get paid to speak from people who are already on my email list and stuff like that, like that's a no-brainer, right? They're there, they're my audience already. So I've seen more with speaker scores for the in-person conferences. For virtual, I don't know. But again, I don't think I have that big of an audience. So I'm not quite sure, but I have strong relationships. So especially like in Canada, because I'm in Canada, like Imagine Canada, Keela, Canada Helps, I have a lot of those relationships. So then when they're looking for someone for a virtual conference, or like something like a webinar, like when COVID started, we did a bunch of webinars on like fundraising during COVID. Like that was kind of an easy, they just reached out because we had already worked together on so many things. So that's been my experience. I definitely agree with you. So as a podcast host and as a podcast co-host, we never, like, maybe when I launched my first podcast, I was like, who has a big audience? But that's not a driving. That is not even close to like criteria that we look at at all. At all. I don't actually, we look for quality content. And I'm trying to think if there's other, I really, and when I look at other conferences, like I said, there have been ones that I've turned down speaking at, and I look at their speakers, and actually there are some, I maybe shouldn't say this, but there are some speakers that I feel like have been, like, what's an appropriate way to say this? There's like the original generation of like quote unquote thought leaders in our sector. And some I feel like are really still relevant and some are less relevant. And if I see too much of the like big names that feel so dominant in the space that there's not room for other people, I actually don't love that vibe. And I don't say yes to those conferences.
I think to end here, I just want to like underscore what I think you're saying is I think also when it comes to visibility for anyone listening, to be the type of person that speaks other people's names in a room full of opportunities that you could choose to have for yourself. And nothing makes me want to scream like people not doing that. It really like makes my blood boil. And so and in fact, I have a blog post coming out with a script because I practice what I preach all the time, which yes, means visibility opportunities, financial opportunities turned down, but like I'm aware of my privilege enough to know that like we got to lift up folks and the world, and these conferences and these podcasts are much more entertaining, educational, inspiring when we have a variety of voices. And so I know personally, like it was so funny last week. This just goes to show that people are so wonderful in our sector and the importance of speaking other people's names, because I got a ton of LinkedIn requests, friend requests last week because of the AFP thing happening in Toronto. I don't know who was like whispering my name. I can shout out specifically Sarah Hushuli, who definitely connected me to one person, but I got like way more invitations than I normally would. And I know it's because somewhere, some people who are at that conference talked about me in some way, shape, or form, which is so generous and kind because I got the physical requests. And I just think anyone listening to this that like wants those invitations versus having to go pitch yourself means that it is your responsibility to also set aside your seat or speak and whisper other people's names when that makes the most sense, and it will come back to you.
100%. Like mic drop. End conversation.
I know. I got
Thank you all
aggressive on that last answer. I feel so strongly about it.
No, but that's why we're having this conversation too, because I do as well. And okay, I don't want to that was such a mic drop moment, but one of the things I will say is like, there are people who I have had conversations with where I continuously put forward other people as potential speakers and the like. And these are people that, let's call it the conference host, is like, yes, I want to, please tell me who else. And, I want to diversify, but we have all these like the same people speak every year for the last 50 years, even though obviously that's an exaggeration. Who else should we be talking to? And I will give them a list with email addresses. Like, here's people you should connect with. And then 2-3 years later, there's no change in speakers. I'm like, no. You haven't shown me that you walk the walk. And I'm not interested in why am I anyways, that is a whole other conversation. But that is an opportunity for you to see the people who align with your values and who share a commitment. And I think
it's really important.
It's worth it.
But it goes back to saying, I think that's where I think showing up as your own thought leader, going back to what you said about consistency, because I think, again, whether you are a nonprofit person looking to hire for services or you are a conference host looking for speakers, it's hard to find you if you can't be seen. And so it just goes back to, again, like showing up as a thought leader so that people then can reach out and say, oh my gosh, I found that blog post or that post so thought-provoking, like we're doing this thing, like let's talk more. It's hard to find you if you're not doing that work. So go forth and get visible. We'll cheer you.
We'll cheer you on. So as I was like in the back of my mind thinking of a title for this episode, I heard the Olivia Newton-John song, Let's Get Physical. You know it?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're still listening to this episode, that's why. That's why we're naming it Let's Get Visible.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right.
See y'all next week.
Bye.
Thank you again for listening to the Confessions podcast for nonprofit coaches and consultants. If you enjoyed today's episode, which I sure hope you did, you can show your support in one of 3 ways.
Number 1, post a screenshot of this episode to your Instagram stories or LinkedIn profile and tag Cindy and I so we can repost you.
Number 2, share this podcast with a fellow nonprofit coach or consultant.
And number 3, leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to grow and reach new listeners.
And of course, make sure you subscribe so you can get the latest and greatest interviews as they drop every Thursday.
And to our fellow nonprofit coaching and consulting friends, remember, we're an open book and here to answer your burning biz questions.
See you next time.